Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, former president and current GOP presidential frontrunner Donald Trump faces a possible fourth criminal indictment. And more students are living on campus at the University of Kentucky. We'll show you how the university is making adjustments to accommodate everyone.
Plus, a first alert weather day continues as more showers and storms are possible this evening. Those details coming up as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. We are still keeping an eye out for the possibility of one more round of storms before much drier and comfortable weather heads our way beginning tomorrow. Meteorologist Cameron Aaron has the latest.
Yeah, Steve, I think all of us are counting down the hours until that cold front passes and we can welcome in that drier and cooler air. But until then, we do have a first alert weather day in place for the possibility of a few stronger storms into this evening. Now, again, that is conditional on if the atmosphere is able to destabilize after that morning round. We talked about that yesterday and also this morning during Mountain News this morning. But again, we are keeping a close eye on that. Here's a live look from the London Corbin Airport. You see some blue sky and sunshine. You may think that's some great news. That's not so great news when you're dealing with severe weather, because that could possibly set the stage for a few more showers and storms into this evening. Right now on the radar, most of us are quiet. We are tracking a few clusters of showers and storms on the I-64 corridor in Rowan County, but again, nothing severe and nothing too widespread across the region right now. However, that could change as we go into this evening, as this cold front could spark a few more showers and storms as it pushes off to the east into our region. But like we talked about, after this front, we are tracking some cooler and drier air to return. But until then, a level 2 risk of severe weather continues across the entire region. Those main threats: heavy rainfall, strong straight line winds, the hail threat, the tornado threat, much lower, but it's never zero. More details plus your 7-day forecast coming up in just a few minutes. Steve?
All right, Cameron, thanks. A grand jury in Georgia may decide this week whether or not to indict former President Donald Trump. It would be the Republican presidential candidate's fourth indictment this year. CBS's Christian Benavidez is in Atlanta with the latest.
Security is high around the Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta, where witnesses began appearing before the grand jury on Monday. Georgia District Attorney Fani Willis and her team of prosecutors are investigating possible interference in the 2020 presidential election by former President Trump and his allies, including this call to Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger.
I just want to find 11,780 votes.
The GOP frontrunner remained defiant while campaigning in Iowa this weekend.
Yes, we did nothing wrong.
Sources tell CBS News Willis could pursue racketeering charges typically used against organized crime.
Georgia has a pretty broad or generous RICO law.
CBS News legal analyst Jessica Levinson says the DA will try to show that Trump and his team were acting like a criminal enterprise.
You essentially have to prove that 2 or more crimes were committed by 2 or more people, and that they were trying to protect or control an institution, property, or an interest.
The former president has been indicted 3 times this year. First in New York on charges related to hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, then federal charges stemming from classified documents seized from his Mar-a-Lago estate, and most recently federal charges related to his efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election and the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Christian Benavidez, CBS News, Atlanta.
Earlier this year, a special purpose grand jury in Georgia said it believed perjury was committed by several individuals and recommended the DA seek appropriate indictments. The White House is marking the 1-year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act's passage this week. President Biden and senior officials will hold events all across the country in an effort to sell the climate, health care, and tax legislation to voters. This comes after a Washington Post University of Maryland poll out last week found more than 70% of Americans have heard little or nothing at all about the legislation 1 year after its enactment. Police are trying to figure out how 3 men ended up dead in a car at an elementary school in Indianapolis. Officers found the men in the car early this morning. A 4th man in the car was taken to a hospital, but his condition is not known. Police say there were no obvious signs of trauma. The Indianapolis School District said in a statement one of the men in the car was drunk but did not say which one. No students were harmed in the incident. The Maui wildfires continue to leave a trail of death and destruction. Officials say now at least 96 people have died in the fires. That number still expected to go up. The blaze that ravaged the historic town of Lahaina is now the deadliest U.S. fire in more than 100 years. Meanwhile, communication is being restored to parts of the island. Hawaiian Electric says the power is back on for more than 60% of its customers. Many folks living in Maui have been without electricity since last Tuesday. The Gilgo Beach murder suspect is off suicide watch. The Suffolk County Sheriff says the mental health staff at the jail decided to remove Rex Heuerman from suicide watch. The sheriff says staff will continue to evaluate him periodically. Heuerman's housing and security protocols have not changed. Heuerman has pleaded not guilty to murdering 3 women found near the beach on New York's Long Island more than a decade ago. 6 former law enforcement officers in Mississippi have pleaded guilty to state charges related to the torture and assault of 2 black men. 5 of them were deputies for the Rankin County Sheriff's Office. 1 was an officer for the Richland Police Department. Just days ago, they all pleaded guilty to federal charges. The victims, Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker, had filed a federal lawsuit back in June. 2 former assistant coaches and the former director of baseball operations at Northwestern University are suing the school. They say former head coach Jim Foster created a culture of racism and sexism. They also claim he retaliated against them after they reported his behavior to the NCAA. The plaintiffs say they were demoted and their contracts were not renewed after they refused to travel with Foster to away games.
On behalf of my clients, I filed a lawsuit today against Northwestern University for negligence because Northwestern allowed its former head coach of the baseball team, Jim Foster, to create an abusive, toxic, and dangerous environment for its baseball staff and for its student athletes.
Jim Foster's dismissal happened days after the Big Ten school fired longtime football coach Pat Fitzgerald last month. With classes starting next week, the University of Kentucky is welcoming back thousands of students. But with more students wanting to live on campus than ever, is there room for everyone? Jessica Umbro spoke with parents and students about their experience with the housing process.
We did not hear about it at first. It was like later on when they said they were running out of rooms. I made her get her stuff done pretty early on, so no concern for us.
University of Kentucky students who turned in the on-campus housing application early are meeting their roommate for the first time this week. But for students who were late to apply, they'll be saying hi to an additional roommate.
I guess more people are going to college now than they did in the past, so especially with COVID. So I think it's fine. I mean, people just got to get used to it.
More people attending college also means more people wanting to live on campus. UK's solution was the Try It program. The university is taking 2-bedroom suites and adding a bunk bed to make them for 3 people.
It just so happened that this year, instead of us having, a 50 to 100 bed problem, it was in the hundreds.
Nearly 550 to be exact. While there are still some students that are moving into dorms with an additional roommate than they may have expected, spirits are still high as families unload their cars and students unpack their rooms.
Getting him into the dorm, signing up was a breeze, and then when we came in, the directions were perfect. It was very quick, smooth sailing.
It was pretty easy. There's a lot of straightforward step-by-step instructions.
Despite the tighter squeeze, Price says the university was able to accept all on-campus housing applications.
Today, we've been able to house every student that wanted to live on campus. And we think, this is going to be a trend that continues to grow and something we are going to have to monitor and watch as we move into the next few academic years.
In Lexington, Jessica Umbro, WKYT.
Students in the Try It program will have reduced living costs. Price says they will pay nearly $1,000 less each semester. University of Kentucky is not the only place where students are starting to come back in for the upcoming school year. Incoming students made their way into the dorms at Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green this morning. The move-in days are part of the university's master plan, which stands for making academic and social transitions educationally rewarding, ensuring the new freshmen are ready for the start of the school year. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, have you ever kept a money secret from your significant other? We'll have some advice to help you communicate about finances.
And thunderstorms are possible this evening, but we are tracking a preview of fall by tomorrow and Wednesday. Those details after this break.